everyone, today's video looks at the character of Edna in Annie's Spectacles. Tried to look at her in 5 quick quotes, although remember, as a minor character she doesn't have as much to say or is spoken to as much as the other characters. Nevertheless, she's still worth thinking about. I am Zoe Sophie from Past English GCSE. I've got my YouTube channel, feel free to check it out. There are a lot of videos on Annie's Spectacles in this and other texts as well, and also English language. So Edna, we know that she is the parlourmaid. We don't find out her surname. We don't find out much about her at all. She is lower class, sort of in the same bracket as Ava Smith, although I'd argue that she is, perhaps if you had to divide this up, she's probably better off than Ava Smith in the sense that she's got a more stable job, and it's sort of implied that she's lives in or is very close to the Burlings, and as such she's got a dependable income, and this would probably explain why Edna's got more to say directly than Ava ever does have. Even though they're both lower class, Edna's better off than Ava in the class hierarchy. So quote 1, this is in Act 1. Most of Edna's lines are in Act 1. There's nothing in Act 2. I looked, I couldn't find anything. If anyone else does, feel free to comment in the comments below and let me know. But she doesn't have a lot to say and I couldn't find it. She's got approximately 30 words in the whole play. So there's really not very much of her at all. There's more people talking to her and about her. So here, this is from Act 1, and this is the stage directions, which you'll see in my other video where I have analysed the opening stage directions. Edna is mentioned in these, but not very much, not like the other characters where there's detail about who they are. She is merely Edna, the parlourmaid. So she's really defined by her role. Defined by her role. And this is very common for the lower classes. There's no title either. She's not Edna so-and-so. There's no surname. She's not really sort of given a whole name. She's known on these very informal terms, which again indicates her sort of status as being not that important. She's just clearing the table. So not only is she defined by her role, there's a lot about her actions and actions relating to cleaning or clearing or doing as she's told. This is the first we hear of her in the play, so I always say it's worth thinking about first impressions. That's really important. And in this one, she is seen to be clearing the table, clearing up after other people. That's in the stage directions in Act 1. Number 2, here we have Arthur Burling talking to her. He says, "Giving us the port, Edna." That's right. So he asks her a question and then he answers for her. Now in plays sort of this depth, it's always worth not just looking at what's there, but what isn't there. And what isn't there? There's no response from Edna at all. She doesn't even get to answer this question. It's all him. He is, in linguistics you'd call him an agenda setter, because he sets the agenda, what we're speaking about. He has the agenda setter, usually in linguistics, is the person with the power, and we usually call question and answer, Q and A, in linguistics terms is called an adjacency pair. That's what it's known as. But this adjacency pair doesn't really follow because there's only one speaker. He answers for her, giving us the port, Edna. And look, again, she's defined by her role. She is doing something. She's the one that is in the background quietly doing things, clearing up the table, handing over the port, making the tea. She's the person that actually takes action, but hardly gets a word in. The only time she really gets to speak is when she's forming this kind of bridge. I call a bridge a conduit. I'm going to put this, conduit means a bridge, a connection, a channel. And I'd say that Edna is more important for what she represents. The lower classes, the poor, women, and she's a conduit. So she's a bridge between classes. So if you look at this interaction here, and I've put all of it because it's important. Burling, this is in Act 1 still. Edna will answer it, so this is the doorbell. Edna enters. "Please, sir, an inspector's called." Now that's probably her most famous line. She's the conduit. She's linking the upper middle class Burlings to, well, we don't know what his class is. There is a video on the inspector. Please feel free to go and check that out. But she is really famous here for this. "Please, sir, an inspector's called." So she's always deferential. That means really, really polite. Deferential, polite. She addresses him, "Sir," So look at that power imbalance. She is, you know, the parlourmaid. An inspector, what kind of inspector? See, agenda setters always ask the questions, and then the people who are more subservient answer them. Question, adjacency pairs, answer. A police inspector, he says his name's Inspector Gould. And that should be capital because it's a name. So she announces him, and this is her role, to sort of clear up, to announce guests, to see them out, that kind of role. Don't know him. Does he want to see me? Again, power. He's the one answering the questions. That's Burling. Yes, sir. Again, deferential. Sir, see that repetition? He says it's important. All right, Edna, show him in here. Give us some more light. So again, he's issuing commands. There's no, I mean, I'm not saying that Burling's necessarily rude to her. This was the way that they spoke. But she uses the pleases. He doesn't. He just uses the commands. Show him. Give us. These are commands, also known as imperative verbs. You've heard that's another way of saying do this, do that. Edna does, then goes out. So you've got the stage directions. Stage direction. Stage direction. They're usually in italics or brackets. They are a technique in and of themselves. So do pay attention to the stage directions around her. She's always doing something or obeying orders. Please, sir, and in spectacles is probably her most famous line. Now, I doubt you would be asked a question just about Edna. I can't say it won't happen because you never know what they're going to do. But I think she's worth exploring for how she represents the lower classes and women. You know, you might be asked about women in the play. So that would be Sheila, Edna and Ava.
And Mrs. Burling.
So it's good to know what she says and what she doesn't. She doesn't really have a lot to say. She does as she's told, and she's that conduit, that link, if you like, between the classes. And not just the lower classes, those without class, like the inspector. She links everyone together by her role. This is also Act 1, an opening door and announcing Inspector Gould. The inspector enters and Edna goes. I thought this was worth looking at just because she lets him in. I would say that's almost sort of symbolic that the lower class lets in the person that seeks to advocate for their rights, advocate for their position. It's just funny, I think, to note that she's the one that lets him in, and he sort of speaks up for people like her. So that's worth noting. Again, stage directions here. Lastly, Act 3. So she hardly says, I don't think she's even mentioned in Act 2. So she sort of fades out, and then Act 3 at the end. Mrs. Burling, sort of look at the way that the Burlings talk about her and to her, the assumption. No, Edna will go. Edna will do this. I asked her to wait up to make her some tea. Don't get me wrong, that was her job. So I'm not saying this in itself is mean, because Edna's job is the parlourmaid. She's the maid. But I love the way that Mrs. Burling, for something as simple as making a cup of tea, putting, you know, the hot water on, shall we say, she's asked her to wait up. So you could argue here, sort of not used, I say again, this is her job, but Edna is sort of, should I say, put upon. Wait up to make her some tea. Make what you will of that. It's her job. She has to do it. Sheila, it might be Gerald coming back because they've heard something, you know, the door. Oh, Edna will go get it. Relieved. Yes, of course, I'd forgotten about him. Edna appears, so she comes back and announces the upper class. It's Mr. Croft. So remember that thing I said about her being a conduit to the classes and all that's going on? Yeah, not just to the inspector, but to Mr. Croft too. Gerald appears and Edna withdraws. Notice how she appears, she announces, person comes in, she's out. So her presence really is, she's really sort of present as sort of a function, if you like. And I don't mean this unkindly towards Edna or her role, but it's almost robotic, her behaviour, because she's sort of just following orders all the time. She's never really allowed to show her personality. I have seen it on stage before where she's been making cups of tea for the inspector. So there's kind of implied through action, sort of it'll be someone reading this and that director of that particular production making a director's decision, but they might have read into her and sort of looked at her being in solidarity with the inspector, because the inspector advocates for people like her, so she's making cups of tea. But that's not in the play. That's a director decision. She doesn't really get a personality because she's merely functionary. She serves a function. So to summarise, Edna is compliant. In other words, she does as she's told. Does as she is told. There's no arguing, there's no thinking about it. She follows orders. That's what compliant means. She's lower class, you know that. She is a bridge between the classes. I've talked about this idea before in this video. I think she really is. I think that's important. She's humble. It's the opposite of arrogant. So, you know, and she would be. opposite of arguably Mr. Burling, for example. She's not arrogant like he is. She doesn't assume. She just gets on with it. Fastidious, this means someone who takes great care. So you can be fastidiously clean, for example. So she takes care with how she does things. She's sort of processive, but it's good. She's thorough at her job, and that's what you'd want for a parlourmaid. We don't know really who she is, other than lower class, compliant. She's not allowed to have a personality. We don't want her to have a personality, or certainly Priestley doesn't, because of this, because she's defined by her role. Parlourmaids weren't known. They were parlourmaids. That was it. It seems quite perfunctory and cold now, doesn't it? But in 1912, remember it's set in 1912, that's what she was expected to be. And they called her by her first name. Again, if you've looked at my etiquette video, which is up, please feel free to have a look at that. You'll see that most people are called by titles. She's not. She's just referred to as Edna. So again, her class is really emphasised throughout the whole play. And this makes her deferential. Deferential means you defer to, you look to, you're respectful to your superiors. And she is. Mr. and Mrs. Burling are the ones, when I tracked through the play, Mr. and Mrs. Burling talk to her in the sense that they order her about, and the inspector comes in and out. The younger members of the family, Eric and Sheila, don't really have dealings with Edna. They don't really boss her around. It's really Mr. and Mrs. Burling commanded, because I suppose they are her technical employers. But notice that. Notice who's talking to who and who isn't talking to who, because this is relevant in the play. Edna is important because of the lower class element, and because she's one of the women in the play. It's important because of what she represents. I hope this was helpful. If you've got any comments or any further thoughts on Edna that you'd like to share, please feel free to comment below and let me know. And if you've got any questions, you can always reach out. My website is passenglishgcse.co.uk, and I've got lots of other videos that you can watch too. Thanks for watching.